617. Sobish provides very good notes for 617. So even though Chogi Drogpa or Dharmakirti has a relatively short commentary for verse 7, statement 17, as Sobish points out. So let's look at Sobish's notes. This is, if you have the book, physical book, it's page 610. If you don't, then you look for the notes for, if you have the e-version, e-book, it's notes for chapter 6, statement 17. So here it says, despite a rather brief treatment in Chogi Drogpa's commentary, the present Vajra statement is of fundamental importance for some other statements. And so understanding this statement is really important because it really explains a lot. The other statements that we're going to find, we'll be elaborating on this statement. It has been discussed in greatest detail in both Dorshema and the Rinjangma. So these two earliest commentaries really focus a lot on discussing this statement. According to the Dorshema, several general views have to be discussed and corrected in the context of this topic. So again, as we say, like when you study the Gongchik, you should not study this as if this is some historical document. You should really study this and say, okay, so what are the general views that is related to what is addressed here? General views that we have read, in so many books that people write about Buddhism, about Buddhist practice. It doesn't matter who, that they write about. Of course, if who is writing about it, if it is a translation of like Sakya Pandita or Longchenpa or Tsongkhapa, then at least with those, it's not like more modern interpretation. Then you can say, well, Longchenpa or Sakya Pandita or Tsongkhapa, they have a different view. So that's fine, right? But a lot of the more modern contemporary writings, the type of writings that maybe brought us to the Dharma, when they write, they don't necessarily write in a way that is very intentionally and carefully intending what they're saying. Then there are some, I would say, messiness in the interpretation. Just a side note, a lot of what, especially in the books published on Buddhism in the West by the popular writers, the big names, whether Western names or Tibetan names, it doesn't matter, the big names. Because a lot of times even the Tibetan names, it's not them actually sitting down to compose the book. They have a team of editors that produce those books for them. And these editors are frequently Western editors, or even ghostwriters, who write in a way that they understand what Westerners want. So by the way, like the famous book many years ago called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. The author is said to be Sogyal Rinpoche, but there was a ghostwriter, one of his senior students. And, it's a good book, but also a lot of things in there. It is because the ghostwriter understands what Westerners want to hear. So same with some other books of popular Tibetan teachers that are publishing in English. I don't have to say too much, but if you go listen to their teachings on YouTube, and then you look at their book and you know, okay, you know, there are some ghostwriters there, which is nothing. It's wrong. I mean, usually it's stated in the book, but we tend to overlook that fact. So anyway, when we're studying something like this Gongchik, right? We have to investigate these views. So here it says, according to the Dorshema, several general views have to be discussed and corrected in the context of this topic. And so be sure to do that, you know. Otherwise, we're just reading Gongchik like some interesting historical document, you know, and interesting debates later between Gongchik and Sakya Pandita, and then that's it, you know. And that's really not the point why we are studying the Gongchik. We're studying the Gongchik to have the Gongchik help us refine our understanding of many of these fundamental issues that we have just taken for granted or we think we know. In fact, many of the fundamental views that I used to teach, whether at the university when I'm lecturing in the class or when I'm teaching at the Dharma Center, again and again, I see that these views, I mean, they're not wrong, what I was saying before, but more and more deepening my understanding of Gongchik helps clarify how what I said before can be better said, more accurately said, reflecting a more subtle, profound understanding of these fundamental points. And so this is important, you know, we have to keep kind of developing, growing in that sense. And not think, you know, oh, I know the Four Noble Truths. Oh, yeah, I know. Actually, we don't, you know, we preliminarily know these fundamental points. But in fact, these fundamental points are the main points that are to be finally realized. Yeah. So there's no shame, you know, there's no shame that we didn't used to understand it this way. This is what we call growth. This is what we call development. And otherwise, you know, all you're doing is confirming whatever you already believe when you arrive at the door. 20 years later, you're still believing the same thing. Then what's the point? Then you're not really seeking a spiritual system to change yourself, but you're seeking something to confirm who and what you already want to believe. Then seems like a waste of time, you know. Just be confident I'm right, and then no need to look at anything else, you know. No need to spend so much effort and resources. I'm correct, you know, end of story, you know, don't need to study more, don't need to spend all this time, you know. So here, yeah. So one of them, it says, probably an aside, but nevertheless an interesting remark. So Sobish says, so the first one that Dorshema talks about is that it concerns the realization of the nature of the mind. So this realization of the nature of mind, which is a precondition, which precedes, right, which has to come before the abandonment of transmigration in the three realms. Before this rebirth, continuous wandering in the three realms can stop, first we have to realize the nature of mind. According to some people, says Georgia Sherab, that realization is different from the realization of the true reality of all dharmas. So there's realization of the nature of mind, and there is the realization according to others. And there is the realization of the true reality of all phenomena, all dharmas. In that the nature of the mind is confined to the true reality of merely one's awareness. On the other hand, the true reality of all phenomena is vast, since it exists as the beginningless, all-pervading nature. Here, Dorje Sherab replies that, quote, nature of mind, semnit, is an expression of our tradition. Our here means Kagyu, and not just Dribung Kagyu. That in our tradition in Kagyu, we use nature of mind, but we use nature of mind not in such a limited way. We use nature of mind, and our understanding of mind and the nature of mind is much broader than the general. So he says, Dorje Sherab replies that nature of mind, semnit, is an expression of our tradition. We maintain that all phenomena are not different from one's mind. So whereas there are traditions that will more strongly, ultimately no tradition, will really say phenomena and mind are two separate things. And there's a wall that, cannot be breached. Now, ultimately, no Buddhist tradition will say that. It's a matter of emphasis. So some emphasis very strongly, mind and phenomena. And of course, there is a basis for distinguishing between mind and phenomena. Phenomena has no awareness. Mind has awareness, right? Inanimate phenomena. The emptiness of the table doesn't have awareness as well. But the emptiness of mind has clarity, have mind, have awareness. So yes, there is a reason to distinguish the two, mind and phenomena. But often, when it gets very academic and scholastic, that division is sort of like being analyzed so strongly until the people studying it seems to have built an absolute wall between mind and phenomena. Then to the degree that they will say, oh, when you talk about realizing just the nature of mind, you're just only talking about a very limited realization. You still need to attain a higher realization where you not only understand the nature of your mind, you also understand the nature of all phenomena. Basically here, Dorje Sherab is saying, no, once you understand, once you penetrate all your layers of confusion into seeing the nature of your mind, when you have seen the nature of your mind, you have seen the nature of all phenomena. And so going on here, it says, since the mind's nature is measureless and not inclined toward any side, it is beyond the proliferating mind. In other words, in the nature of mind, which is vast and comprises all phenomena, one cannot distinguish the selflessness of phenomena and the selflessness of the person. I don't know why that's capitalized, selflessness of the person. I think it's a typo. You can correct that, because it should not give the impression the selflessness of person with a capital S is something special. Yeah, that's just a printing error, I think, a typo. And so Sobish summarizes Dorje Sherab's quote by saying, in other words, the nature of the mind, which is vast and comprises all phenomena, in the nature of mind, which is vast, one cannot distinguish the selflessness of phenomena and the selflessness of persons. Again, there is a lot of scholastic in the commentaries that talk about the differences between selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena. Especially if you study in the Shedra, these are, really very much debated. Because one of the reasons is like the Mahayana philosophical schools will say Hinayana positions are rather crude or gross. Their philosophical understanding is rather crude. Because in Hinayana philosophical systems, they say, Mahayana people say, they only talk about the selflessness of persons. Whereas they don't talk about the selflessness of phenomena. Mahayana philosophical positions will say that. But we never quite hear from the Hinayana side to say, wait. We only hear from the Mahayana side. So then in Mahayana it says, our understanding of wisdom is much more refined, because not only do we talk about the selflessness of persons, we also talk about selflessness of phenomena, which is a much more subtle level of selflessness that needs to be realized. So then the Mahayana systems will develop things of explanation like, bodhisattvas until this particular level, they only realize one type of selflessness, and bodhisattvas until this level, then they will start to realize selflessness of phenomena. And then they will say the arhat, right? Or the Shravaka, which is the hero of the Hinayana system, they'll say, the Shravakas, even at the fourth level, their highest level, they only realize selflessness of persons and not phenomena. So there are all these different debates. Actually, then Tsongkhapa comes along and says, no. Actually, arhats, if they're really arhats, they also realize the two selflessness, but what they are lacking is they lack bodhicitta. So there's all these, right? Very scholastic debates, which, to be fair, is a way of polishing or making the mind very sharp. Hence, Dalai Lama emphasizes that so much, It's good to make the mind really sharp. But on the other hand, on the Kagyu side of things, especially the early Kagyupas that did not emphasize this kind of study, they say, yeah, you can draw these lines. Selflessness of person, selflessness of phenomena, on what level you achieve this and that and that and that. It says, but, realization doesn't happen this way, So my way of expressing this, I always like to say, there are no lines in nature, A straight line was a rather recent product in human history, and therefore in the history of nature. Well, human beings are nature. So in that sense, yes, of course, a straight line that you can draw is part of nature now. But relative to how long human beings have been around, and then even bigger, relative to how long life has existed on this planet, like line, as in straight line, is fairly recent. Likewise, these conceptual lines that we draw when we're studying kind of more academic style, whether traditional academic in the Shedra, right, in the Tibetan, what I would call seminaries for training khenpos and geshes, or in the modern versions that the Western lamas teaching in the West have created, a hybrid version of the Shedra studying. Yeah. Yes, we learn all these lines, and then if we are not careful, I feel we get stuck in these lines and these categories, and we think, it's like this. And even worse, I feel, is we think that when we understand this, we think, now I know. No. Now you only have an amulet that you're walking around protecting you, but you don't know yet. It is sort of like the story of Naropa, the dean of one of the 4 deans of Nalanda. Is called the gatekeeper. I think the northern gate, But basically it's gatekeeper, not in the sense of the guard of the gate, Gatekeeper, as in he guards the orthodoxy of the place. So the Northern Gate is like you could say maybe like, one branch of Nalanda University, four colleges maybe. So he's the dean of one of the colleges. It said that he mastered, and he received empowerments, and he trained, and he meditated. Then one night, a dark shadow hovered over him. He was shocked. He turned and he saw this old woman. He was doubly shocked, triply shocked, because Nalanda rules, after sunset, women are not allowed, right, where the men are. But anyway, there is this old woman or ugly woman, sometimes it's said, and was just asking him, what are you reading? He said, I'm reading this text. He says, do you understand the words? He says, yes. Then the woman said, do you understand the meaning? And he said, yes. Then the woman got very angry and yelled at him and said, you're lying to me, And he confessed. He said, yeah, actually, I have all the concepts, I have, he probably wrote commentaries on that. He could, draw all the lines, but he didn't really understand. That was how, he had his midlife crisis, as I would call it. And then he left Nalanda and found Tilopa. In the same way, I think Gampopa experienced that, having trained for many years as Kadampa master in the Kadampa lineage, and then went to see Milarepa. It's not that he gave up his Kadampa heritage. No, our current Kagyupa is really a combination of Milarepa's yogic way, Marpa's tantric mastery, tantric especially theory, explaining Tantra, Milarepa's experiential legacy, and Gampopa brought from Atisha's emphasis on bodhicitta, on a systematic approach to Buddhist practice. All that got blended together, and it's what we have as Kagyu, as Kagyupa. Same thing with Pamodrupa, he was a great master in the theoretical and even meditation, but it wasn't until he met Gampopa that Gampopa sparked this realization in Pamodrupa. Likewise, when Jiten Sumgun came, and with Jiten Sumgun is another good example, when he came, he's already done years of personal retreat. It said that he was already taught Mahamudra. He was already practicing Vajrayogini. He had received those empowerments. He's done many retreats, even gained, powers to heal, powers to protect, so on and so forth. But it wasn't until he met Pabondrupa that kind of ignited his inner realization. But you see, this is also very interesting and also good to note. Even after Pamodrupa ignited this inner realization, after Pamodrupa passed away, Kyoba Rinpoche continued to stay there and receives further instructions from Pamodrupa's senior disciples. And he continued to learn from others. Even after Pamodrupa has already ignited the realization of nature of mind for Jigten Sungden. Now, coming back to the notes here, the actual point of this topic, however, is a discussion of the nature of the realization of emptiness and what ensues from it, what happens after. Now, in a way, you can say, do we really need to talk about what happens after you realize the emptiness? Realize the nature of mind? On some level, no, because whatever we talk about here is not going to be it, right? In a way, right? What's the point of talking about, what happens when you become Buddha? In a way, it's kind of like, well, why do I need to talk about it? Here, the reason we need to talk about it is more due to if you think, so we'll see very quickly, right? One very strong viewpoint out there during Kyoba Rinpoche's time and today even is that once you realize emptiness, cause and effect is rendered meaningless or powerless or irrelevant. Yeah. And so even though it seems like now we're talking about something that doesn't need to be talked about, as in what happens when you are Buddha, what happens when you realize emptiness, but actually it's something that we need to talk about because it has implications on how we relate to the vows, how we relate to the teachings about avoiding the 10 non-virtues and practicing the virtues. Because so what we think or believe about the result will have consequences on how we practice now. To that degree, we need to talk about what the result looks like. But even as we talk about what the result looks like, we always remember that in the end, whatever we can put into words and into concepts that we can grasp right now, is not the exact result. But what we can do is to talk about result insofar as how we think about the result might impact what we're going to do while on the path. You get that? Yeah, that whenever we start talking about when you are Buddha, blah, 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 when you realize emptiness, blah, 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 right? Whenever you hear that, know that it is not talking about, oh, this is really how it is when you're Buddha. But it's talking about how you think about what it is when you're Buddha impacts what you're going to do now. Likewise, then, if you find yourself sitting around with Buddhist friends, and then the conversation starts or goes in the direction of like, oh, well, when you're Buddha, da 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 da. And if you find that that conversation is getting to like trying to explain Buddha in terms that we can understand, and then people wanting to say it is like this and it is not like that, then you have enough understanding and wisdom to say, I'm not going to really talk much about this, because if what you're really interested in is in the actual fruit of Buddha, no amount of talking is going to get us anywhere closer to it. But if this conversation is going to be about how we think of what Buddha is or is not, and how does that impact our practice now, that conversation is worth pursuing. That conversation is worth having. Yeah? So this is also a way to know, when to get into a conversation and when not to. But Buddha was very skilled at that. When people came and asked him questions, and he realized that no, they're looking for something else, and no amount of engaging this person is really going to come up with an answer. Then he remained silent. The common view is, as explained in the Dorshema, that a yogi teacher who has realized the mind bestows on the disciple the three trainings that abandon non-virtue and accomplish virtue as pith instructions. By training in these pith instructions, an excellent samadhi arises in the disciple's mental continuum. Remaining in meditative equipoise and not being attached to that samadhi, he realizes the essence of mind that is free from all extremes and proliferation. Up until now, Dorje Sherab, Dorshema, no problem with this description of what might involve, what might be involved in any person's training. It's the next part. Then Dorje Sherab says, people assume that by watching mind's nature with the eye of that realization, all mental conceptions of virtue and non-virtue and all of karma and result will be birthless. Even here, no problem yet, actually. Yeah, even until here, that they are birthless, no problem yet. Furthermore, the mind and the thoughts arising from the mind will also not be perceived. The body and all appearances will not be perceived. Cause and result will not be perceived. Karma and karmic ripening will also not be perceived. We're starting to have a problem now. Yeah. Now, Dorshema is showing. This is where we're going down a slippery slope. Finally, all the appearances that variously appear will be without appearance, and one will realize them as emptiness. Again, not yet exactly a problem, but already the seeds of misunderstanding is about to start, is already planted. Thus, henceforth, this is where the problem is. One must not accomplish virtue, one must not abandon non-virtue, and one must not accomplish any results at all through a virtuous or non-virtuous mind, like space, that you should be like space. Thus, two shining lights are inseparably mixed, like rivulets flowing into the ocean, or two spaces being merged. One has exhausted the cause of entering samsara. Therefore, they say, I do not put a skull cup on my head anymore. That means, I don't know, that translation is a little weird. It's more like, I don't, it's not so much like skull cup as in skull. It's literally, it's not literally, it's, to translate it, I think smoother is, don't put a head on top of another head. You already have one head, don't put another head on top. And they hold that after they have mastered realization, dependent origination of cause and result is nullified. Because, according to this, it says, when you cannot see anymore I, me, mine, and I, and other subject, object, when that is all gone, where is there any karma to talk about? Such a view is backed up with quotations. They quote one tantra as stating, its ultimate result arises at the time when there are no more causes and results. So don't get me wrong, or don't get whoever wrong. This view, you can find many passages in the tantras, in the sutras, that can lead to this thinking. Another text whose title also has an Nyingma flavor, this text says, the bringing of all phenomena to an exhaustion is the essential meaning, the ultimate view, the great seal. Then there's another one in Milarepa songs. From the perspective of absolute truth, not only do obstacles not exist, even the Buddha does not. In the ultimate truth, there is no mind, and one has brought all phenomena to exhaustion. All these are valid quotations. The situation recalls the Samye debate, where Tibetan historical accounts have ascribed similar views to the Chinese master Hershang Mahayan. So we don't have time to talk about this, but if I were to elaborate here, I would say, yeah, so this is related to the accusation that Kagyupas are actually from this Chinese heresy. But actually, the Chinese heresy, the Chinese never believe in what the Tibetans said they believe in. The Chinese heresy is this idea that, you just have to realize mind or emptiness, then everything will be fine. No more cause and effect, Anyway, such statements, however, are only acceptable on the level of absolute truth and concerning the view, but they're not acceptable as general statements or, as in the present case, as guidelines for conduct. Dorje Sherab relates an interesting detail concerning Jigten Sumgön's training under Pamodrupa, whom he attended for a little over 2 years. So Jigten Sumgön arrived quite late in Pamodrupa's life, spending only a little more than 2 years. But if we look at Jigten Sumgön's example, it says, as a result of the first year spending with Pamodrupa, Jigten Sumgön realized all phenomena to be emptiness. And he understood that at the time of death, I will become a Buddha. This is Jigten Sumgön writing about what happened. He said, after spending about a year with Pamodrupa and practicing under Pamodrupa's guidance, he realized all phenomena to be empty. And then he thought, at the time of death, I will become a Buddha. All concerns can be cast aside now. Someone endowed with realization does not take birth again, since at the time of dying, the two kinds of luminosity will merge, and one attains peace. In the first intermediate state, I will become a Buddha. Moreover, even though now, while still alive, the conceptions of cause, karma, and afflictions will arise, through the vital point of their being emptiness in nature, they can no longer bind. So himself, even he thought that. Even though the conceptions of cause, karma, and afflictions will arise, but by realizing the vital point of emptiness, they can no longer bind. They are like a hemp rope burned by fire. It still has its form, it is not destroyed in its structure, but no longer bind because its nature has disappeared. If you burn a hemp rope, it will remain in the shape of a hemp rope. But if you try to use it to tie anything, it'll fall into ashes. Just like how, like our printed paper these days, the ink is so strong when you burn, right? You can still read, everything. But if you try to pick up, immediately it crumbles. So Kyoba Rinpoche, after first year with Jigten Sumgön, when he had a realization of emptiness, he thought, oh, now cause and effect, interdependence have no power over me anymore. Now, he continued to practice. During the second year, however, he understood that such a realization is not the ultimate one. In that year, Pamodrupa taught many jatakas, the stories of the former lives of the Buddha, and also taught the Dharma wheel of ultimate definitive truth, namely the sutras of the third wheel. Jigten Sumgön gained the impression that Pamodrupa had taught this for his benefit alone. So Jigten Sumgön felt, in the final year of Pamodrupa's life, Pamodrupa taught a lot from the Jataka tales. See, we think Jataka tales, right? Stories of the past life of Buddhas are like fairy tales, like fables. And we think this is for kids. Right? In fact, you look at Jataka tales, they're like comic books. Right? Wisdom Publication make Jataka tales for kids. Shambhala make Jataka tales for kids. But Pamodrupa, in his final year of his life, mostly taught the Jataka tales. To the point that Kyopa Rinpoche, now looking back, right, years later writing, he thinks, it must be Pamodrupa saw that I have an incomplete understanding and thought, I understood everything. But he taught the Jataka tales, the Jataka stories. He felt that he was the only one who had understood that cause and result exist within emptiness. That this has an impact on how the realized person should behave. And that to follow such a conduct after realizing emptiness is an act of compassion. And none other than Buddha Shakyamuni's life, as I always say. You look at him, he always acts in this way. He doesn't do anything outrageous. Those are found in the life of the Mahasiddhas. But if you look at Buddha Shakyamuni, he doesn't. One result of such a realization was that he abandoned his lay status and took full ordination. Moreover, from then on, he made a conscious effort to conduct himself all the more with purity of body and to adorn himself with the supreme training of disciplined conduct. Here, I think Sobish is a little sloppy. When it says here, it gives the impression that immediately in the second year he ordained. No. Actually, Kyopa Rinpoche did not ordain until at least 6, 7, 8, 9 years after Pamodrupa passed away. Yeah. One result of such a realization. This realization happened, years later. Jiten Sumgön actually continued to not be a monk until at least maybe 7 or 8 years after Pamodrupa's passing away. I talked about this. I told this story in the footsteps of the Masters of the Golden Lineage. You can go listen to those recordings. The whole set of 5 classes are now available on our YouTube channel. Thanks to Omar getting them over there and Javier helping. So Choki Drakpa quotes Milarepa twice, pointing out that virtuous conduct is not to be interrupted, and even the most subtle evil is to be shunned at all times, even when one has already attained full realization. In particular, he states that, quote, emptiness itself arises as cause and result, unquote, and that one will automatically engage in efforts regarding eliminating and accomplishing of cause and result, and in efforts of establishing virtue and abandoning evil, unquote. Dorje Sherab presents the same forceful message with the words ascribed to Gampopa. So Gampopa said the following. The Jowo Kadampa Lama said, having realized emptiness, one will proceed very attentively concerning karma, cause, and result. That is very right. Now that I have gained experience, I understand that this is a profound dharma transmission that the Kadampas possess. I am called a yogi, but I am very attentive concerning karma, cause, and result. This is a pith instruction taught by my gurus. Since there is a lineage from the Lord Atisha, there is no chance that it could be otherwise. And the next quote is from Nono Rinpoche. And Nono Rinpoche is also quoting Gampopa. In general, if you do not want to practice the teachings, don't. Then don't, But from the moment of practicing the teachings onward, this attentiveness to cause and result is of very great importance. I'm called a yogi, and I'm very attentive to karma and result. This is the pith instructions of my guru, Me, his Kadampa guru. If one does not pay attention to karma and result, one has not pierced the heart of the matter. It also does not help to refer to a high view. The higher the place, the deeper the abyss. Where you may wind up is unpredictable. If you keep talking about high place, the higher you go, the deeper the fall. The deeper the abyss. Having established a lineage for such a teaching, Doje Sherab also provides examples of how cause and result still exist for those who have realized emptiness. Jasimila, for instance, from time to time sang songs in the village and thereby contributed to the Guru's household with what he gained from the villages. The positive result of that was that later in his life, the Dakinis invited him to their Ganachakra. And Jomotashi Seringma, this goddess, offered yogurt with a spoon made of precious stone. A negative result experienced later in his life was that he had to sustain himself with unsalted nettle soup because of the hail he brought down on the fields of his family's enemies. Similarly, Jigten Sumgun experienced almost immediate karmic retribution after Pamodrupa's death, when he led the community of Pamodru. Because he soon got into conflicts with the community, he finally had to secretly leave Pamodru. And from the life story of Buddha, especially the non-Mahayana tellings, you see that the historical Buddha continued. Sometimes when he went begging for food, no food at all. One time they only got horse feed. Other times, he suffered physical injury. And then at the end, when he passed away, he had dysentery, basically, food poisoning. So again, this is because Mahayana sources, in emphasizing a different aspect, and even more so Vajrayana, sometimes, if we don't know how to read that, it gets skewed into like, oh, Buddhists don't experience cause and effect anymore. Yeah. Those friends of mine on here, I can see Wei Ting, Leonard, Jasper. We grew up, studying, many of us, Theravada texts. And for us, what is said here sounds very familiar. We will say, yeah, of course, even when you are Buddha, even when you have realized emptiness, previous cause and effect is not gone. But if you have never been exposed to those traditions, and you just read sort of these more bombastic Mahayana and Vajrayana sources, then it sounds like everyone is God with a capital G. So that's why the Gongchik Statement 1, Chapter 1 makes very clear. The other people's view, they think the Buddha is like God with a capital G. He does what he wants because he is all-powerful. See, that statement has implications on how people might not say, because they're educated in Buddhist language, they will not say Buddha is God with a capital G. But Elsewhere, if you look at how they interpret karma, essentially you can say whether they call Buddha as God with a capital G or not, they have given Buddha the same qualities. Oh, rules don't apply anymore when you are Buddha, which is what people who believe in God tends to think. Rules don't apply to God anymore because it's God. And many Buddhists, I have to say, especially those in the Mahayana, Vajrayana, will think Buddha is like God in the sense of, karma don't apply to them anymore. They can do whatever they want out of compassion for beings. Here, it's like, no, that doesn't work like this. Thus, the key point that cause and result are not nullified by emptiness, and that results infallibly arise from causes even after emptiness have been realized, has been established through the lineage masters' instructions and examples. Now, of course, we are not saying, we're also not saying that they will arise. When it says arise infallibly, it doesn't mean, that it cannot be changed. Okay? So even in the Theravada, they tell this, they say, right, in one of the Theravada sutras, it says, if you put a tablespoon of salt in a small glass of water, when you drink it, it's very salty. But if you put the same tablespoon of salt into a swimming pool and you drink the water from the swimming pool, it's not salty at all. But the amount of salt that is in the swimming pool and the amount of salt that is in a small glass is exactly the same. So now our minds are small. So when negative karma ripen, it's like drinking from a small glass of water. The same negative karma that is going to ripen, if it is ripening in a swimming pool, the degree is lessened. So in this sutra, the Buddha says, don't say, that's not possible. Because if that's not possible, then there's no point to practicing the path. Yeah. Now that's why, in Milarepa's example, he had to sustain himself with unsalted nettle soup because of the hail that he brought down on the fields of the family's enemies. Now, this negative karma of bringing down hail to destroy, right, the fields, if Milarepa did not purify, the karma of bringing hail down to the field and killing people, it cannot just ripen as, nettle soup with no salt. It will ripen much worse, Yeah. Towards the end of his comments on this Vajra statement, Doja Sherab also presents two canonical quotes to establish A, that despite emptiness, one has to continue one's attentive awareness to cause and effect. B, that even when one has realized true reality, results infallibly arise from causes. So the first quote, whatever arises from conditions does not arise. It does not have the nature of being arisen. Whatever depends on conditions is emptiness. Whoever understands emptiness is one with attentive awareness. And in the same sutra, it is said that even though one understands that there's no ripening of karma in true reality, virtuous and non-virtuous activity never goes to waste. Let us now turn to Dorje Sherab's presentation of scriptural authority from Indian treatises. So he quotes Nagarjuna: a phenomenon that is not dependently originated does not exist. Therefore, a non-empty phenomenon does not exist. For whomever emptiness is possible, everything is possible. For whomever emptiness is impossible, everything is impossible. So emptiness is that which allows everything to be possible. These verses are quoted here as scriptural authority for the fact that A, every single phenomenon is dependently originated and thus empty. And B, that when emptiness is accepted, acceptance of cause and effect within emptiness is implied. Then a passage from that commentary. This is Nagarjuna's commentary, okay? For whom there is emptiness, there is dependent origination. For whom there is dependent origination, there are the Four Noble Truths. For whom there are the Four Noble Truths, there are the fruits of religious practice and all the special attainments. For whom there are all the special attainments, there are the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. For whom there is dependent origination, there is righteousness, its cause and its result, as well as unrighteousness, its cause and its results. For whom there is the righteous and the unrighteous, their cause and their result, they are the obscurations, their origin, and their basis. For whom there is all this, the law of the fortunate and unfortunate states of rebirth, the attainment of the fortunate and unfortunate states of rebirth, the way of going toward the fortunate and unfortunate states of rebirth, the passing beyond the fortunate and unfortunate states of rebirth, the means for passing beyond, as well as all worldly conventions are established. Dorje Sherab furthermore compares the arising as cause and result to space. One may use space as an illustration of emptiness, but within that space, the sun heats up the air. And when there is moisture, a rainbow will appear. One may deny space emptiness, but the birds fly through it, chasing the rainbow without meeting with any hindrance in space. They also cannot take hold of the rainbow. Here both the empty space in which the rainbow appears and the rainbow itself that appears in space are obviously empty, since they cause no hindrance and one cannot grasp them. If one insists on the emptiness of space and rainbow, however, it is pointed out that the rainbow with its 5 colors, vivid and unmixed, appears within space, and space cannot stop its appearance. Thus, despite space emptiness, the rainbow is not prevented from appearing. Similarly, Dorje Sherab sums up, the happy and painful results arise from virtuous and non-virtuous actions, not stopped by emptiness. There is more technical explanations. So for the geeks, you should read the rest of these notes that Sobish provide. It's good. It provides, if you like details, it provides further details for even more clearly understanding. But if so much details hurts your head, then you can back away, okay? Questions or comments? Let me rest my voice and let you talk.
It seems to me that the only way cause and effect does not occur is if one is not embodied and is Buddha. If you're not embodied, there is no cause and effect, is that? But as long as you're Buddha and living,
Yes.
all of this applies because it's
Yes.
the way things
Yes.
are.
And then even when Buddhas like manifest nirmanakayas, right?
They still are
They
subject.
still, yes,
Yeah.
operate within cause and effect.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Is the implication also if your conduct is perfect, you're effectively in nirvana. You're a Buddha. You are
Yeah, sure.
generating no negative karma.
Yes, you're not generating any negative karma, but you're generating positive karma.
Only positive. Yeah.
So next Monday, we will go and look at the qualities, the results of the qualities of Buddhahood. So back to Vajra's statement in the chapter 1. And then Vajra statements of chapter 6, like 15, 16, those relates to qualities as well. So like Vajra statement pertains to qualities. Is in statement 26 of chapter 1 is about the qualities. Basically, the statements about qualities, again, it seems like it's talking about, oh, what is really Buddha? What is Buddha really like? But again, if we get caught up in that and think that we can finally come up with the perfect description of what Buddha is, then we would be mistaken, we would be trapped. So these seeming discussions about what the final result is, to the degree that we discuss that, we talk about that, is to pay attention to how we think of the result might, right, have an impact on how we practice now. So the main view that is the main problems corrected under the discussions about qualities. What are these Buddha qualities? It's addressing a position that says, when we talk about Buddha, there is nothing that we can say. And therefore, these qualities don't exist at the state of Buddha. In a way, it's a version, right? It's like another version of cause and effect don't exist at the state of Buddha. meaning Buddha qualities don't exist at the state of Buddha, right? It's another version of how cause and effect don't exist in the state of Buddha. So Kyopa's statement is going to address that as well. So in a way, it proceeds from the understanding of what is the relationship between dependent origination and emptiness, or cause and effect and emptiness. Because the same people who might say, oh, when you're Buddha, cause and effect don't apply as well. In a way, you could say, I mean, they're not even like, I'm not saying that they are like hedonists, far from, but these are just, not just, but these are people who want to emphasize how in the Buddha state, they want to emphasize the transcendent nature of Buddha. So that you have to transcend cause and effect, and you have to transcend love, compassion, joy, all these Buddha qualities, because they say, whatever you can say about Buddha is not it. Which, of course, Kyopa Rinpoche will say, yes, of course. However, if due to that thought, then you practice or acted incorrectly here, then we have a problem. Then we have a problem. And I want to say, it's not very scientific. As in, I didn't take statistics of what's going on and document all the cases. In the most kind of well-known Buddhist scandals of Tibetan Buddhist communities, there's another one that I just shared recently, although it's not such a big group, but nonetheless, his books are very popular. Actually, that case, this is Surya Das. I've already known. I thought people already knew. I didn't realize that it wasn't public knowledge. And in part, I think it's not public knowledge because he didn't have such a big organization. But his books, definitely was very popular. Anyway, if you look at the profile of the teachers and the groups that have got into these problems, these scandals, these abusive behaviors, more often than not, they are groups that go in this direction of saying, it's beyond the mind. It's transcendent. You cannot conceive, because your mind is limited now. So you cannot conceive what it is like on that side. There's a relationship, even with like seemingly innocently, saying, oh, at the Buddha state, it's beyond, the view, again, back to, the view. At the expense of conduct, Then if you zoom out, and you look across, right? So in the West, at least, right? And actually around the world. Well, in the West, because let's look at just the West. The most prominent forms of Buddhism in the West, right? You can summarize it into the Tibetan forms, which include Bhutanese, whatever, all those. Then the Zen form, which there's Korean, there's Japanese, to some degree there's Chinese. Then you have the Southeast Asian forms, which is like Vipassana and related, right? These three, The problems that arose in the Zen communities, they are ahead of the Tibetan communities. meaning they have gone through that stage of growing pains. And all the scandals and all the skeletons in all the closets, basically came out in the 80s, 90s. Now is the time where the Tibetan tradition and all the skeletons and all the scandals are coming out of the closet. But the Theravada Vipassana, the third major Buddhist group, right? Actually, they have been in the West the longest of these three groups. Relatively, no skeletons hidden in closets. Relatively. Compared to, the Zen communities and the Tibetan communities. And relatively no skeletons. They're not perfect. Human beings, all are human beings, trying their best. But there's something to be said about, in Theravada, they're much more careful about conduct. And to that degree, like the Chinese tradition in the West, not very influential, but also very little skeletons in closets, because the Chinese tradition is still fairly conservative in the sense of, in the context of conduct. Very similar to Theravada in terms of conduct. No excuses at all for like a teacher, a monk, to be behaving in ways that can cause people to kind of like, what's going on? But in the Zen and the Vajrayana, when you have what's going on? You're like, oh, wait. Oh, it's transcendent, it's beyond, it's... But on the other hand, you have to also not forget there is karma. And karma means cause and effect, right? So you cannot just blame one side, Now I'm not blaming the victim. I'm blaming both the victim and the abuser, so to say, which is the West is attracted to these outrageous types. That's why Chinese Buddhism is not very popular in the West. And then the more traditional Theravada also not very popular. There are no superstars, really, because those traditions de-emphasize. So those traditions who emphasize, enlightenment right now, all of that, and the guru or the Zen master can show you, then that's the karma involved. So like the statement in the Gongchik, the higher the place you go, the deeper the abyss. As long as you don't fall, the view is pretty good. But if you get sidetracked by the view and don't pay attention to the next step you're taking, the abyss is very deep. So that's what I mean by there's also karma, If you're attracted to all the mysterious things, you have very powerful figures, very charismatic teachers. It also means, the abyss can be deep. Excitement comes with a price. And you can see, people like that, people want that. People want to surrender to someone. I see that again and again. People want to surrender to someone because everything becomes easier, I suppose, in some ways, when you just surrender to someone telling you what to do. And you feel like if they don't tell you what to do, you're not loved, right? To some degree, that might be true, if you feel like nobody is telling you what to do. But then quickly it crosses into the line where everything you do needs to be told by God, a guru, Roshi, then we're in trouble, Nonetheless, the Kagyu lineage reminds us to have an authentic guru, to be able to establish this relationship in a genuine way from both sides, is such a blessing. And this is not something that can happen within a few years. No. And if you rush, you're going to be in trouble. You have to be able to think in terms of lifetimes. If you, I can say this. If you think in terms of lifetime and stay focused, then things will unfold in the right way. Twofold. Think in terms of lifetimes, but stay focused. So that you're not thinking in terms of lifetimes and then just say, oh, I can do this, do this, do this. Stay focused, but think in terms of lifetimes. Then all the proper conditions you'll be able to bring together and to cultivate. If you stay focused, but you are not thinking in terms of lifetimes, then it can become very claustrophobic, very tight, and maybe very exciting, but problems will arise. If you think in terms of lifetimes, like many Asians, then they never practice, They just go about doing nonsense and still feel like, oh, I'm doing something, No, it's just, lifetimes. Then it becomes, mañana. It's just business as usual. But if you bring those two together, stay as focused as you have the ability and capacity to be, but think in terms of lifetimes. Then you'll be fine, Anyway, this Sunday, 9 to 11, is the teaching brief, because the sadhana for the medicine Buddha is long. So if you have registered, an email should go out soon with the Zoom details for this Sunday. There's a couple of you that I know want to participate, but you are not registered. Yeah. So I would say, please reach out to me directly. Send me a WhatsApp or something, and I'll send you the information. This is not, given to other people, so you have privilege. I'll send you the text, as well as the Zoom details for this Sunday. Yeah. Any questions? Changchu semchu rinpoche ma kye pa nam kye gyu che kye pa nyam pa me pa gong ne gong du pe war shu.
Thank you.